I'm Mike Olivia, and I direct the Joan Gans Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop, which is a research and innovation lab based uptown across the street from Lincoln Center. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks, Susanna, Pollock, and your whole tremendously wonderful Games for Change staff and group. This year's festival is just getting started, but it's fabulous, I already tell. Games for Change continues to be the place to go if you want to learn about innovation in the field. So we're going to get into this, I think, this discussion that's on this. But before then, I wanted to talk about the kind of an overview of one of the challenges that has kind of taken national initiative and gotten national attention, along with Eline Media in 2010, and inspired by, you remember this guy, President Obama's Educate to Innovate campaign. We created the National STEM Video Game Challenge in 2010. And today we're going to announce the winners of the final challenge in its current form. So I thought that maybe we could kick off this session, if you will permit me to offer a few brief observations about what we've learned that might be of interest from the challenge. First, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here, game design definitely can be a powerful asset in positive youth development. Our research, as well as others and many of the folks in this room, documents that game design initiatives can play an important role in propelling youth forward in exploration of STEM-based careers. You'll hear from some of our former youth winners, as well as a youth winner from this year. We will make that case. There's also evidence that game design helps build key skills, such as computational thinking, storytelling, systems design. That said, I don't think that we've nailed down the best ways to promote sustained learning pathways for those who participate in time-bound competitions. And I think that today's panelists will share some really interesting new ideas about that. Second, I just want to say that it takes multi-sector alliances to build momentum for fresh approaches to youth engagement. I mean, this is a time in which we really do need to hang together and build new alliances. Of course, philanthropic and policy leadership is essential, and I want to especially acknowledge the pioneering and generous support of the Entertainment Software Association. As well, they've just been, key pioneers here, and Kevin O'Hanlon is here, and I just want to thank them for the leadership that they've shown. But there's been many others in philanthropy, and who've been very, very supportive of our challenge and others. I remember the pioneering work of the AMD Foundation, Microsoft, and especially the White House Office of Science and Technology. Each also, had helped to propel not only national interest in the challenge, but national interest in games-based learning in general, and design competitions and game jams especially. Since presidents and funders' priorities do tend to shift, success also requires ongoing national outreach partners. We've been incredibly fortunate, and just want to recognize some of those organizations: the American Library Association, Boys and Girls Clubs, Brain Pop, PBS Kids, Black Girls Who Code, the Girl Scouts, Games for Change, been enormously helpful, among others, in providing leadership to the challenge. But we've joined an ecosystem too. These organizations have all created, in many respects, more important initiatives than we have to help build 21st century skill sets for underserved youth. Third, sustaining competitions requires local partnerships. We've had the great pleasure of working in different regions, New York City, Pittsburgh, which allowed us to catalyze local STEM communities and to build out college and career opportunities for participating youth. Marc German is here, and he'll talk a little bit about this on the panel. The support of the IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, also allowed us to lead hundreds of community-based game design workshops in partnership with museums and libraries. That was incredibly important. And in doing that, we were privileged to make connections to many other great game development resources that are bubbling up in cities across the United States. So that leads me to my final observation. I'm almost done. I think game design is becoming embedded in youth development, in the entire youth development ecosystem. Still got a little ways to go, but it really has bubbled up. Since launching the STEM Challenge, we're thrilled that so many other opportunities have emerged to inspire and motivate youth. The National Games for Change Student Challenge of Games for Change. The Technovation Challenge, the Congressional App Challenge. Scholastic added a video game category to its prestigious art and writing competition. There's even a STEM challenge in Australia. I can't predict what the next round of field building initiatives will bring or look like, but there is a much richer knowledge and practice base to build upon. So let me finish by sharing a few highlights on the Challenges body of work and announce the winners. Over 6 cycles, we've had the pleasure of receiving entries from over 20,000 youth from middle and high schools. We've had over 110 youth winners, 40% of whom are young women. We're especially proud of that. This geographic spread includes 25 states and 80 cities. We've awarded over $500,000 in prizes. 7 winners presented at the White House Science Fair. And this year, over 3,000 students submitted video games or game concepts. We have 23 winners in 14 categories, and we're very proud that the winners are among the most diverse in history, our history. I want to show you a little bit about the winners, and I'm looking for where to get it on the screen. Oh, there it is. So allow me to introduce the winners of the 2017 National STEM Video Game Challenge. And it's coming. Oh, it's spacebar.
All right, come on, guys.
Hey, we're rolling?
Yes, we're rolling.
Okay,
Well, we're rolling right now.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Kyle Roque.
Hi, I'm Lucas Armand.
My name's Shrey.
I live in Waukesha, Wisconsin.
We are from the Applied Math and Science Academy located in Vineland, New Jersey.
I'm Seda Wolf and I live in Tehachapi, California. My hobbies are reading, writing, singing,
Playing the piano and doing triathlons.
Trumpet. I love fish.
I have 2 guinea pigs, and I am a black belt in Taekwondo.
When I get older, I either want to join the Navy or become a programmer.
And we both play a lot of video games.
Some of my favorite games are Portal 2, Little Big Planet.
I like to play Minecraft and Candy Crush.
A short while ago, I designed and entered a video game into the National STEM Video Game Challenge.
Congratulations to the proud winners of the 2017 STEM Video Game Challenge. This year's winning games were selected from over 3,000 submissions from students across the nation. We're absolutely thrilled to celebrate this diverse and talented group of creative game designers.
My game is called the STEM Obstacle Course, and it includes the concepts of STEM.
My game is called Artificial. While all the other robots are brainless drones, this one robot is actually intelligent.
Twisted Petals is my first video game. I hand drew all the animations, and it took me around 7 months to finish.
The game I made was Green Hero. You don't have to have superpowers to save the world.
My game, Cyber Champion, is a 2D platformer set in the cyber world where you run through different rooms trying to make decisions that will keep you safe online.
The game I made is called Keeper. It's a 2D top-down action game. I created my game to improve my skills in animation, programming, and game design.
My game is called the Digestive System. It's about the digestive system. But don't worry, the game is pretty fun. I had to make sure that my code was organized so that it made sense to me, at least.
I'm part of the team that created the pyramid.
It's a 2D platformer that's based on ancient Egypt.
For anyone who wants to learn how to design their own video games, have patience and keep learning bit by bit.
Don't give up.
When I first started making my game, I figured I would just wing it. I soon realized I couldn't do any of the cool plot twists or character development that I wanted unless I wrote out everything ahead of time.
Start small and take advantage of the resources available online.
Go through, read documents, watch videos, and you'll learn.
Make sure you add your own personal touch to it so it's really yours.
My personal goal while making games would be to make games more diverse.
This contest and my game have been incredibly helpful in assisting my designing skills.
The feeling of playing your own game is great.
I made this.
We hope our game makes a difference and we hope you play and enjoy it. Bye!
I made this. I love that. Actually, I didn't make this. Matthew Day from Pittsburgh made it, and really, really appreciate the good work, strong work that he did. Before I close and introduce our next speaker, I just wanted to say a word of thanks to the folks who really spent heart and soul on developing the challenge. Marc German, who's led the challenge for the last 3 years, Brian Alspach, both are here today. Brian's one of the co-founders of the challenge. Both from Eline Media are partners in developing this, and my colleagues Catherine G. and Katie Svehag, who've done so much to advance the challenge's interests. I encourage you strongly, I urge you to visit stemchallenge.org to learn more about the winners, and while you're here, go check out and play their games at the STEM Challenge booth in the marketplace today and tomorrow. So a bit about one of the national initiatives that is moving into a different stage of development now. I now have the absolute honor of introducing our next speaker, who is a winner of the 2014-15 National STEM Video Game Challenge, Olivia Thomas. She is double majoring in computer science and games, interactive media, and mobile development at Boise State University. You might, those of you who are taking game design classes online, you might catch her online doing things. Many of our former winners have continued to develop their interest in game design, and Olivia is here to share her own experiences and her own career pathway. Please join me in welcoming Olivia.
Hello, my name is Olivia. So when I was younger, I either wanted to be a video game designer or an entomologist. Then I grew into a healthy fear of insects, and the rest is history. Okay, actually there was a bit more to it than that. My path once I settled on this idea of designing video games has really been an incredible one. There have been so many amazing people and organizations who have helped me along the way, and I'm here today to talk about how that happened. It was really a contest that started it all. As a 9-year-old who wanted to design video games, I literally had no idea where to start. I checked out some books from a library about programming, but after I had read for 50 pages and only learned how to write a Hello World program, I very quickly lost interest. Then, one day when I was in middle school, my mom emailed me a link to something called the National STEM Challenge. Being a very competitive child, something was immediately sparked. I discovered a game design tool called GameStar Mechanic through the STEM Challenge, and that was where it really all began. Suddenly, I had my tool and I had a goal, and that goal was no less than to win the STEM Challenge. My first games were wobbly attempts at design, but each one that I made was a little bit better. I entered one of those games in the STEM Challenge, and though it didn't win, something had been kindled in me that wasn't going to stop. I think it was really that goal that drove me to improve my design. Regardless of whether I ever won, having the STEM Challenge in mind motivated me like nothing else to keep designing more and better games. In all, I designed over 60 games on GameStar Mechanic. Eventually, I won the Scholastic What's Your Story contest, and as a prize, I was able to participate in GameStar Mechanic's game design class, where I learned important lessons about scaffolding and playtesting. Given that the game that got me there only had a 1% win rate, those were lessons that I very badly needed. I still had the STEM Challenge in my sights, however, and I entered it every year. And finally, in my junior year of high school, I actually won. Winning the STEM Challenge gave me so many amazing experiences and resources. A highlight for me was getting to tour Shell Games in Pittsburgh. Then, also through the STEM Challenge, I received the incredible opportunity to showcase my winning game at the White House Science Fair. As I came to know the joy of seeing my creations blossom under my fingers, I found that I had a desire to share this wonder with others. Thanks to one of the contests that I won, I received a grant to put on a 6-week game design workshop for middle school girls. During that workshop, I was able to use some of the activities that I learned at the STEM Challenge Awards ceremony. All of these experiences really shaped and solidified my decision to go into game design in college. The STEM Challenge and other contests not only gave me confidence that I could actually do this as a career, but they connected me to resources that made that future possible. My high school game design wins helped me to get scholarships that made college possible for me. The only thing about this decision that really made me nervous was hardcore coding. I kind of had this idea in my head that the game design I had done was fun, but it wasn't the real thing. Perhaps the greatest surprise that I encountered when I started college was that developing games for real isn't that different from what I've been doing half my life, and I love it just as much. Through my experiences, I learned the design process, to work on a deadline, and how to learn new things. Though I hardly realized it, I've been learning to be a developer all along. And that all started with the contest. Thank you.
All right. Just throw my slide up there.
Sure. You can talk if you want to.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Olivia. Such an inspiration, hopefully, to all the students out in the audience. How many students do we have in the room? Just curious. College students, high school students, middle school? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Games for Change Student Challenge, which was mentioned by Michael Levine and is a program that Games for Change started here in New York in collaboration with the New York City Department of Ed 3 years ago. And we have one of our amazing winners here, Geneva, who will speak after me about her experience and her passion for game design. But first, I just want to tell you a little bit about the program that we run in hopes of involving some of you. We've got teachers, we've got mentors, and we've got students as stakeholders. So the Games for Change Student Challenge invites middle school and high school students to design digital games about issues that are impacting their communities. So we've had topics for students to make games about, like climate change, Geneva's game, like immigration, like youth justice, and smart cities. We offer game design courses in schools with our partners from Mouse, and we run game jams as well. So the challenge is a city-based program that culminates in a competition for students to enter and an awards ceremony. We're entering our third year of the Games for Change Student Challenge this fall here in New York, and we're also expanding to Los Angeles in partnership with the Annenberg Foundation. So we're really excited to move westward. This past year, we ran the program in Pittsburgh, Dallas, and in New York City. And so I'm going to show you some of the partners, but first I want to congratulate the winners of the 2017 challenge, including Geneva. And so I know we've got a couple of teachers and maybe students in the room. Can I have you guys stand up? Let's see. Okay, cool. Just so I can point you out. Awesome. So there's Scott. He's a teacher. Awesome. So in New York City, our grand prize went to Sean Berman, a middle schooler from the 30th Avenue School here in New York. He made a game about local stories and immigrant voices called Adventures in New York. Sean is back there. And okay, I think I may have to ask you to hold your applause till the end because we are trying to move through quite a lot. So the Local Stories and Immigrant Voices theme was supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities. The NEH sponsored the theme and connected us with historical societies in each of our program cities. And students got to meet subject experts, historians, and scholars to learn about conducting research and listening to oral histories. In Dallas, the grand prize went to Cecilia Briscoe, who I believe is here. There she is in the back. All right, all the way from Dallas. So Cecilia made a game called Conquest for Energy, and this was in our Future Communities theme. Cecilia goes to Skyline High School in Dallas. And Future Communities was a theme that was supported by Current by General Electric, all about smart technologies and how we can improve our cities. And then we also have a grand prize from Pittsburgh in, again, the Local Stories and Immigrant Voices theme, Brandon Botzer from the Trinity Area School District. His game was called Reflections, Generations of the Past. And then our runners-up for this year, Geneva with her game that she'll talk about, Green Hero on climate change. In Pittsburgh, another climate change game by Adam Horan. And in Dallas, New Home by Pedro Ponce in Skyline High School. And just to mention, our climate change theme partner was NOAA. So how do I advance? There we go. Hey Ben, how do I oh, which is down here. Aha. All right. So some of our past partners and supporters for our Student Challenge program, mentioned a few of them. And then here are the winners from this past year. And then finally, some of our challenge partners for this coming school year. We're so excited to bring back Unity, one of our supporters from the first year of the program. I mentioned Annenberg, the NEA, Take-Two, Bigglesworth Family Foundation, and then lots of other awesome partners. So I encourage you to visit our booth in the marketplace on the second floor in the cafeteria. We will have all of the Games for Change Student Challenge winners and the STEM Challenge winners on display. You can meet some of the students, play their games, and you can visit our website to learn more about how to get involved. So without further ado, I want to introduce Geneva Heyward. Geneva is a high school student here in New York. She's a student at the High School of Art and Design, and Geneva's been inspired by video games since age 3, which has led to a deep passion not just for playing games, but also for programming, for art and graphic design and drawing. Geneva has done a tremendous number of game design programs, including the Future Game Designers program at the Museum of the Moving Image here in New York, a couple of others. And another exciting thing about Geneva is that she was also a STEM Challenge winner this year, so really doing double duty there. And so Geneva's pursuing a career in game design and would, I'm sure, love to talk to any game designers out in the audience about what that's like. So Geneva, come on up. Thank you.
Hi. So as you heard, I love playing video games, and because of my dad, who's right there in the audience, he's always been like pushing me forward along with my family and friends, and pushing me to do all these big things like going to high school in Manhattan for art. And from there, I've been finding out all about these programs, and then I found out about this contest. And when I first found out about the Games for Change contest, it was actually an email from one of my game design teachers from the NYU program that I was at. And she was like, oh, you guys should join. And immediately once I saw it, I was like, okay, I gotta do this. And so when I first looked at the 3 categories, climate change was the one that what spoke out to me the most, because like the world is changing and not in good ways, really. And so there needs to be a way to change that. And so when I made the game Green Hero, I was mainly, like, what I mainly thought of was like mini games of people doing good deeds, but instead it changed into a superhero, so it could like attract to children and be like, yeah, superheroes can do all these things, but you don't need powers to do these things. And yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia, Geneva. Now, one last round of applause, and have to sit down. All right, we're going to move into the next phase of our session. I'm Susanna Pollock. I'm president of Games for Change. Thank you all for being here and joining us this afternoon. I'm going to call up to the stage. You want to come on up, and I'll make the introductions. These are a number of, hold on a minute. A number of, nope. Is that going to be a problem? We good? Okay. All right. So on the, we good? Okay, so we have assembled here a number of the participants who've helped make both the National STEM Video Game Challenge success over the last 7 years, but also the Games for Change Student Challenge over the last 3 years. We're going to top a conversation about what is this student-to-industry pipeline, how can game jams and challenges provide pathways for students to move into strong career areas in this sector. I'm going to ask a question to each of you, and when I do, you mind just saying your name and your affiliation, and then come in and answer the question? So first I want to start with a definition of youth to industry pipeline. What does that mean to you, and why did your organization get involved? We'll start with Marc on that one.
So my name is Marc German. I'm with Eline Media, and we are one of the co-founders of the National STEM Video Game Challenge. With Eline Media, we make games that players play to understand and shape their world. We feel it's very important for students to have gateway opportunities where they can progress down a pathway and have more opportunity to learn about science, technology, engineering, and math, where they can focus on learning computational thinking, design thinking. And through the many years of the STEM Challenge, we've seen multiple opportunities for students to come in where this is largely motivational and working with partners in museums and libraries, and also looking to the game industry, working with the IGDA, Women in Games International. They've been very helpful in trying to catalyze local communities to be able to support the students down these pathways.
Great. Kevin, you come from a funder's scenario. You've obviously been a believer in this opportunity for many years, but the National STEM Video Game Challenge isn't the only program that you've been a part of in this area, is it?
It's not. So Kevin O'Hanlon, Entertainment Software Association, so you heard from my boss earlier, Mike Gallagher. So we represent the domestic video game industry. We also run E3, which is the big video game trade show, just happened back in June in Los Angeles. So we're coming at this from kind of the larger industry perspective. So our member companies are the 34 largest video game companies, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, Electronic Arts, Activision, Ubisoft, to name a few. So some of the challenges, I think the two that we've done most recently that I think are potentially most interesting for this conversation, we do an annual competition with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, where they actually have Latino students create games that are specific to the life experiences that they've had growing up in underserved communities for the most part. And the stories and the games that come out of that are absolutely incredible. And so for the past 4 years now, they have actually presented their games to the Office of Science and Technology at the Office of Science and Technology Policy of the White House at the White House. So it's a very unique experience for the students to actually watch kind of the progression through to reaching the White House. And then one that we did that was a little bit more limited, but a kind of interesting opportunity. We worked with AARP, which is an organization for those who are for seniors, let's say. Keep it PC. And we actually used the Higher Education Video Game Alliance. So we reached out to the schools that participate in HEVGA, and we had college students create a game to help AARP reach into a population that they have a very hard time serving, which are seniors who are socially isolated. So we had college students create video games to help mitigate social isolation in the senior population. We got down to 3 semifinalist teams. They got to come to E3. They had Sid Meier, John Ratzenberger, and Freddie Wong were the judges. They picked the final game, which has been awarded $10,000. It's currently under development. And when it's done, it will be featured on the AARP game page, which gets 1.2 million unique visitors per month. So it's an incredible opportunity for these students to get some good airtime for their game when it comes out. And the game, for those of you interested, was called Letters of Mystery, and you can read more about it.
Great. Anna, hello down there. Hi. Talking from a city perspective, right? You work in the city of Pittsburgh, which is a unique environment in which both the STEM Video Game Challenge and the Games to Change Student Challenge has participated in. Why don't you talk a little bit about the ecosystem and what is it that makes that community so supportive of this?
Yeah, so my name is Martinez. I work for the Remake Learning Network in the city of Pittsburgh. And for us, we have been working for 10 years to pivot the conversation from education to learning and really figuring out all of, in our keynote we heard today, the paratext that supports an individual moving through multiple different institutions, out of school time spaces, how the government may affect their education, how their family life might affect their education, how their peers might affect their education, and how that leads ultimately to the success of an individual. And so at Remake Learning, we're really interested in funding the connective tissue that supports all of those different pathways. And so for us, in addition to pivoting from education to learning, we're also pivoting from pipeline to ecosystem. Because for us, pipeline indicates something of an A to B to Z, and what we're really interested in is all of the bounce points that go outside of the quote-unquote pipeline, and I think that the rest of the panel would obviously agree with that sentiment, right? And I think for us, looking at games as a catalyst point, we heard from both of the winners that spoke here today about how those catalysts happen and how that might not be school or that might not be workforce development in the traditional sense, but it's obviously leading into these spaces of tremendous growth and success. And so any way that we can start to measure those things comprehensively is important, because I think that we haven't really figured out the formula to how we support that on a systemic level. And not only is that putting us further and further behind in terms of academic and career success, it's also putting us behind in terms of equity and diversity in these spaces. And that's something that we need to address in order to survive, right?
Thank you. So Marc Lesser, as an educator in offering opportunities for students to actually learn how to make the game, to make games and other forms of media, I'm curious about how you feel your role is in creating this pipeline in this ecosystem.
So I'm Marc Lesser. I'm a senior director for learning design at an organization called Mouse. We're founded here in New York. We're a national youth development organization that's really all about supporting and representing the amazing potential of young people in creative computing now and for our future. So, I feel kind of two ways about the question. One part of me hates the idea of youth to career pipeline as it, with that nomenclature. I think that it's really important that we remember that when we're working with 15 and 16-year-old young people, that if I ended up in the pipeline that I chose in 15, I would be first baseman for the Mets. And so we have to be real about where young people are, and this is not about a pipeline to careers alone. This is about producing creative young people who find happiness and excitement in their work, period. And ways of expressing themselves that are more powerful than without these skills and tools. So that's what we're interested in. On the other hand, Mouse for 20 years has been engaged in a conversation around equity and who has access to creative computing and those futures, and who has a voice in that space. And so we need to be part of this conversation about pipeline, because there are a lot of our young people who we have the pleasure of working with that are, we realize ourselves as a broker for young people into experiences that help them see the kind of future that they're looking for. And Mikkel is pointing at me, is a former student of ours. Mikkel went from not just Mouse programs, but also participated in programs at iBeam, which is another amazing nonprofit here in New York. He had supports at home, and I think is an amazing, and by the way, now studies game design at the Parsons School of Design, is an amazing embodiment of what it means for not just Mouse, but all of these players to come together and think about what an ecosystem looks like that supports young people who have futures in these space, because it's not just about what the industry of gaming looks like, although that's extremely important. It's also about the role of games in the future of solving the very real cultural problems that we have as a country. So we need everybody's perspective on that, and we need to make sure that there's equity and opportunity in finding that. So I feel two ways about it. We are extremely engaged in the pipeline conversation. On the other hand, I think we need to remember that what is most important is that we are engaging and exciting young people about creative computing and not overdoing it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think there's a general understanding that this process of game design and game making is tapping into so many other skills that are being developed, right? In helping young people become holistic, makers, right? In the 21st century skills conversation. So I agree with you completely on that front, Mark. But you brought up two things that I thought we can talk a little bit about, which is equity and inclusion. And I know that it's getting dark in here. Somebody is leaning against the lights without realizing it.
This is the disco portion.
Okay.
Yes. Gonna get real.
So I want to talk about partnerships and how important it is and how you've leveraged partnerships to help really drive the urgency to make this program accessible to many, as inclusive as you can. I know sometimes it's easy to, in the ramp up of a program, to get support, but how do you maintain it? So I wonder if Marc German, you would talk a little bit about that, how you've managed that over the last several years.
Sure. One of our key funding partners was the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And they funded us for several cycles to be able to do game design workshops. So each cycle we did at least 20 workshops across the country. And as Michael Levine mentioned, we did regional spotlights both here in New York City and in Pittsburgh. So it was an opportunity to work with museum staff and library staff to do workshops for youth and their mentors. We also made sure that we were doing very much a train-the-trainer model to be able to work with their staff so that they could replicate what we did and be able to scale that. We reached through many different communities throughout time. Lots of challenges in that. Oftentimes we would find that there would be an enthusiast on staff who was very much interested in game design, and that person was often very talented and would leave. And then the question would be, what would happen to that program after that individual left? With the STEM Challenge, we have competitions in many different categories, usually on different platforms, everything from Scratch to GameStar Mechanic to Unity. But also one of the categories that we had, which turned out to be very important over the years, was the written game design document. And for the written game design document, it was simply an opportunity for a student to write down his or her ideas, to describe it, and to add images. And when we were trying to determine where we would do the workshops, we had technology requirements, wanting to have connectivity so that we could have students have experiences both online and offline creating games. And we would often reach a point in the conversation where we realized that libraries in particular didn't have the technology infrastructure to be able to support the workshop. So we were creative. Sometimes we had just one laptop and we used a presentation laptop to be able to do that. And then we realized, no, we shouldn't back away from that. So in partnership with a Hive network, for example, in Chattanooga, or even in Anchorage, Alaska, we started focusing on just the basic concepts of what makes a good game, talking a little bit about the importance of written game design documents. And it was interesting to see over time, this year, our 6th cycle, the area that we had the most growth was in the written game design document, where it increased 3-fold. So I think we're also seeing that students who had the opportunity to submit one cycle for the written game design document came back the following year, and they had better access, better connectivity there. The other point too, in terms of inclusion, Geneva made a good point that it was a very quick soundbite that she had in the video where she wanted to be able to make games that reflected diversity. What was really interesting to see, particularly in this year's cycle, was that not only did we have a very diverse group of winners, but more importantly, what we were seeing in the video games was students that reflected those people who like to play the games. And for the first time, we're seeing more of that being involved as models.
I think some of the offering the prompts that you have offered and we've offered at Games for Change and asking kids to really think about their lives and make something that they can relate to has helped bring those stories, right, to the table. Marc, did you want to say something?
No.
No? Anyone?
It was an itch. It was a poorly placed itch.
It was. You weren't bidding on anything.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Anyone want to add to that?
I can just compliment the work that Marc has done over the last several years. We were involved since round 1. Was the amount of feedback that was valued from the educators, especially that they were working with, because again, to quote the keynote again, you heard today how so often teachers and learners are treated like they're not a viable market and that they're not the ones that ultimately are being these designs and this research is to serve. And I think that you and your team did a really good job ingesting that feedback, really listening to what teachers were saying and trying to troubleshoot as you went along the way. Often, sometimes even in real time. Yeah.
I was curious, what can those of us in the room today do to support this effort, and from whether it's the youth to industry pipeline or it's creating an ecosystem of learning, for students. I mean, we've got a lot of people in the room from an educator standpoint who are community organizers, from NGOs, game designers. How can you get involved? And what would you how would you prompt the next generation of programs like this? Yes, please.
I have two, hopefully concise. I think as a parent, I think for those of you who are parents, get to know games and play. And even if you weren't a gamer as a kid, start to know what your kids are into and sit down and hear over the course of the next 3 days some of the research about co-play and what all of the affordances of gaming are for young people now from very early ages. And make sure you know that stuff, because you are certainly missing out if you're not playing games with your kids. If you are teachers in schools, first I applaud you for doing this kind of work and integrating this kind of pedagogy into your day-to-day, because it's not easy in the context of a school to do things that are this kind of innovative. And I would say to you, please continue to reach out and take advantage of the nonprofits in the cities where you are and the pre-college programs and university partners and all of the folks who really do want to help and be part of the continuum. So yeah, those are my two.
Great.
Kevin? I'll make a shameless plug here. So my day job, I'm a federal lobbyist, so I work with federally elected officials trying to make them realize the importance of video games as an educational tool. And it's an uphill battle. Just demographically speaking, 3/4 of the House of Representatives is over 55. They're just not demographically inclined to appreciate the power of video games as an educational tool. So I would encourage you, go, we created a really great resource. It's areweinYourState.org. It is a map of the industry. So my boss, Mike, put it up in his slide deck earlier, but if you visit the website, it's a clickable map where you can put in your zip code, areweinYourState.org. So if you visit the website, put in your zip code, it will take you to your member of Congress. And if you click on their picture, you can actually send them a social media card, which will tell them about the presence of the industry in their state, in their district. And that type of engagement is essential because we start at the very fundamentals with many of these members of Congress. They just don't recognize that there's an ecosystem out there for educational games, and that makes conversations of federal funding for K-12 school districts very difficult. So I would highly encourage all of you to put in your zip code, send your member of Congress the media card, and then follow up. Talk to your legislator, talk to their staff about the importance of games as an educational tool, because this conversation will help to predicate the foundations that Marc was speaking to. Libraries don't always have the IT infrastructure. If you can help us convince members of Congress that it's important, get more federal money into the K-12 system for technology and for STEM education, it makes this conversation much easier.
I think I would add to that. First, speaking to the parents here in the room, whether it's Geneva's dad, who I spoke to on the phone, who played a very valuable role in play testing his daughter's game between iteration. Olivia's mom, Trish, who's sitting in the back with her daughter, Lauren. Trish's younger daughter was also a STEM Challenge winner. So there's a lot that families are doing to be able to support their students. Through a partnership with the STEM Challenge early on with AARP, we did a series of intergenerational workshops, which was originally designed to be between grandparent and grandchild, and we did it in places like the Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh and Kennedy Center and Guggenheim Museum. And it was really powerful to be able to have families sit down and take back family game night. I think often parents don't understand the technology, they don't understand the students' agency in there. And I think by being able to have workshops, whether it's together or family game jams or talking about strategy, there's new opportunities for exploration and being able to support students. I think with teachers, We've been able to visit a lot of teacher classrooms. Steve Isaacs, we had a chance to visit him not only during the school day, but seeing him run a game design club after school, which is very important for kids not only to hang out and geek out, but to be able to learn more, to try some of the new technologies, to try the virtual reality there. With the STEM Challenge, we've done various implementation calendars, one that aligns with the school year, and then 2 years ago, we tried an experiment by running over the summer months, trying to find out whether we could get more students engaged through summer camps and out-of-school time organizations. And this year was very confirming, again, about the role of the teacher. I think the quality of the games was much superior because the role of the teacher helping the student get across the finish line. And if you speak to many of those teachers here, they were not gamers. They were not familiar with that, but they were good teachers. They used a lot of project-based methods. They were asking a lot of process questions. So again, I think you can find students that take agency. There was a team that won this year for Intervene, and one of the students there, Tochi, talks about being able to, he picked his middle school because there was a game design club, went to the school, realized the teacher had left, there was no club, and he decided to start the club up. He recruited 20 people, that became down to 10, and this team won the Verizon App Challenge in their first year, and then they won the STEM Challenge. So I think there's much that to be said about the role of a parent and teacher as mentor, and then the community organizations, even working with the industry. Both the Games for Change Student Challenge and the STEM Challenge rely upon industry experts to do our judging. Sandy is in the room there, Steve, and others who have done the judging there, and in collaborations with mentorships and supporting the STEM Challenge has been very valuable.
I want to touch on that in just a minute about mentorships, but I am going to open up the conversation to questions in just a few minutes, so please think about or jot down some questions you might want to ask this group. We'll have about 5 minutes for that. But first, so Marc, you talk about industry involvement, whether acting as judges on panels or on reviewing. I know for the Games for Change Student Challenge, we tap mentors to come in and work and develop relationships with the classrooms, with students to give feedback on games, to participate in game jams. And now, and also with some prizes, offering experiential prizes for students to actually see what it might be like for a day of shadowing in an experience. I'm curious, I'm going to throw this to Anna about what in the city of Pittsburgh, are there the role of mentors something that you guys invest in?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really part of the underpinning of all of the successful work. I mean, we know that there's millions unmeasurable factors that lead to individual success, but we do know that one of the most important factors is a caring peer or adult that is encouraging, that someone can turn to look for advice. So why don't we support that, right? And so when you're looking at a couple of those factors, there's a structural component and there's a cultural component on why those things may or may not be getting the support or the value that they really need. So for us, we're addressing the structural elements through actual support through money, through programming, and through in-person and shared learning opportunities. We manifest these things through things like our workforce and youth entrepreneurship working groups. They're really an opportunity for people in that space within our region to come together and not just know what each other is doing, but figure out what are the systemic issues that we can address collectively through government, through higher ed, through academia, through out of school time, to start to address some of these issues. So we see that in youth entrepreneurship, we see that in workforce, we see that in computer science for all. There's a bunch of them. And then the other side of that, cultural, right? Why maybe we don't support mentors culturally the way that we mean to is because we're not measuring in a comprehensive way structurally across sectors, right? We don't speak those same languages, and that's problematic, right? When we talk about games, that's a perfect example. You hear so often games, all those biases flood in. And the fact of the matter is that representation really matters in these spaces, and it's a lot of this support is coming from the top down. So what we're trying to do is flipping it and really starting to see, what does learning innovation even mean? What does the boundary of equity mean? And I can't answer that question, but I know that if I talk to hundreds and hundreds of people from different walks of life and I'm really intentional about who I'm talking to, I can start to see and understand more fluently what mentorship means, how mentors are navigating the field, where mentors are coming from. Why are we not seeing mentors from this space, but we're seeing tons and tons from another? And if we start to really visualize this and share back and teach back and be critical and brace ourselves when we don't hear the things we want to hear, I think we can start to get into that structural support that is desperately needed.
I know one of the challenges that we're going to be running in September of 2017 in partnership with the Annenberg Foundation in Los Angeles, talking about another city, focus initiative. One of the focuses for Annenberg Foundation is something called Annenberg Tech, and it's a program that specifically looks to tap into the tech community and the games community, the studios in the city, to engage them in volunteer programs, mentorship programs, giving field trip opportunities, workshops. So that is going to be a very specific channel that we'll be exploring with their partnership. So I agree completely that we have to find the channels that and get in and have those conversations. I'm encouraged by what's possible. All right, now here's the time. We've got about 5 minutes. I'd like to open it up to questions in the audience. Oh, and there's quite a few. Oh, we have 10 minutes. Excellent. So really good. Why don't we start over right here?
Hi. This actually segues well from what I was just saying about equity. My name is Mary. I work for an NGO called Breakthrough when we work on gender equity. So my question is, I think it's one thing to talk about career pathways and another thing to talk about actual careers. And the reality is that the industry, the people who are making and implementing these programs are overwhelmingly male. And so I'm wondering kind of what you see happening in the industry or what you want to be happening in the industry to kind of actually be making space for more gender parity for non-male students.
When you say programs, what did you mean by that?
I mean like the work that you all are doing, creating educational programs.
So I'll talk a little bit about the STEM Challenge. For many years, we've been trying to keep the demographics to try to determine the gender ratio. As part of registration for STEM Challenge, we collect some information. I think the last 2 cycles, we've given students the option of declaring male, female, or undeclared. This year we had like a vast majority that did undeclared. But we've tried to be able to focus a little bit more on including more girls by doing some girls-only workshops, which has been somewhat successful there. We've had some opportunities with Eline Media. For example, we had partnered with the Girl Scouts of Los Angeles and Sony PlayStation, where we did a series of workshops, which was all female at Sony PlayStation, where the girls would come for 1 to 2 Saturdays for several hours and be able to get their Girl Scout patch as a result of their completion. And what was nice about that, in addition to being at the Sony studios in Santa Monica, there was a panel and there was probably 10 employees there, and they were talking about their very specific roles there. So I think, number one, it's trying to be able to provide more models of females who are in the industry, trying to be able to get representation on gender issues amongst the judging panel there. It's shifting a little bit there. What we're seeing a little bit more and encouraged is that if we look at demographics of game design programs, 2 years ago, USC's program had more females than males for the first time. We're seeing that males still predominantly tend towards being a computer science, where game design is attracting more females. So I think we're beginning to see some of the changes there.
Great. Next question. Oh, go ahead. Please add to that.
I would say Heyward did some research of their membership about 2, might have been 3 years ago at this point, and found that video games in particular had an enrollment rate for women that was double other STEM fields, and the actual graduation rate was exponentially higher. So the study is on the Heyward website, but it's got some interesting and very positive data on kind of the iterative progress that's been made over the past few years.
For those who don't know it, Heyward is
Higher Education Video Game Alliance. So Constance, who keynoted this morning, is the president of the Higher Education Video Game Alliance, which is a consortium of just short of 200 domestic colleges and universities that offer degree-seeking video game industry feeder programs.
Okay, back there.
I actually have a question for our winners as well as the entire panel.
Great.
And the question that I have for everyone here speaking is, being a mentor, and I teach kids how to design video games, even though I have very little knowledge myself. So everyone that I work with, we're all learning together. The very fact that designing video games can be somewhat of a burden in and it consistently when they're developing these video games, because I've had that experience myself where I find something very difficult and I say, all right, I give up. So how do you guys, starting with the winners, push yourselves to complete that project to the end?
Okay, so let's see. For me, I definitely ran into that roadblock a lot, where I would sporadically get books from the library about programming and then I would give up because I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing. I think the thing that really ended up getting me excited was when I found GameStar Mechanic. It was a tool that it's really easy to use, and it let me kind of turn my ideas into reality and see them take shape really quickly. And I think really the important thing for me was that it was being able to have these ideas. I had so many ideas in my head. I had images of what I wanted to make, and finding a tool that allowed me to really start creating those and start seeing my creations come to life with a easier, more WYSIWYG tool. And then from there, that kind of led into programming naturally, and it really prepared me for that.
For me, I'd have to say that when I get in like those bumps in the road where I just feel like giving up, I think of how can I simplify this to make it easier instead of like continuing to try and make things more complicated without understanding what I'm doing. Like by keeping a game simple and just having like the core things that you need, I feel like that really helps keep kids interested as long as they understand what they're doing. And once you master the easy stuff, that's when you add a little bit of more complicated stuff.
Great, thank you. Marc, do you want to? Yes, please, a round of applause. Do you want to talk about it from your standpoint?
It's such a great question and an interesting question. We should do a session on it because I think it's a long conversation. I think we do a disservice to young people when we show them how to use Scratch and they make their first game and we say, you're a game designer, right? Without helping paint a clearer picture of what that means and understanding the dimension and the rest of it, which comes back to my issue with the sort of pipeline approach, right? It's like most kids who learn to enjoy designing games are probably not going to go be professional game designers. However, when you pull apart games and you need to love story, you need to love character, you need to love systems, and there is a place beyond being just a player in a great game. I think there are a place for so many different roles, and I think that if I were mentoring now, I would figure out ways to pair those young people with the thing that really excites them. If it's character, and really deconstruct what game design is about beyond great gameplay or great graphics or whatever else, and not try to force the idea that if you can put something together in GameStar or Scratch, which is tons of fun and you should learn how to do, that's the entire picture. Really focus on what excites them and sort of give it more dimension. With my own kids, that's kind of where we are. It's like interest comes in and out. And one other, if we have time, thing that I want to say is the other super powerful thing for my 8-year-old is YouTube as it relates to games. He's constantly engaged by YouTubers who are making Let's Play videos and exciting him about the idea of being, sort of beyond a player. So the other thing I would say is to parents and mentors, spend time with young people who are learning game design on YouTube and get them excited about some of the really huge talent that's on YouTube right now, getting young people excited about what it means to really appreciate games with more dimension.
Thank you, Marc. We have time for one more question right over there.
Yeah, so this actually bounces off of your question, and I didn't really hear anything about educators and incentivizing K-12 teachers. So I actually work with educators, or I used to. I'm in Virginia now, but when I was in New York City, I worked with K-12 teachers and actually taught them game design, and they actually expressed the same type of frustration about like becoming or putting your mindset into game design and actually feeding it to children. is there like talk about how you incentivize people in educational systems? Because I know in New York City, it's really hard for teachers to just go out for personal development, and then that's like one systemic barrier. The other barrier is, like we said, just in the practice of game design, it's hard enough as it is. So like being a game designer, I feel like it's a really important role for other designers to go and mentor those educators. So are there programs like that? I know like when we had this program at the White House and we would talk about K to 12, those were conversations going on right over here.
I will just say that in New York City and now Los Angeles, we do, as part of the program that we're running, we are offering 20 teachers to learn how to run game design classes in the classroom through the Mouse curriculum, and offering them ongoing support. And I don't know if you would phrase it as mentorship, but ongoing support to help them get through the different modules so that they can effectively transfer that knowledge over to students. And then on top of that, we are offering mentorship from game designers to go into the classrooms and also help from that perspective. So it's not necessarily a scalable solution. We're offering that right now to 20 teachers per city that participates. But I think those kind of programs are some ways in which to not just give them the curriculum and say, good luck, you're on your own, right? It's some kind of structured, ongoing support, which is one of the things that's great about the Mouse program.
So I would say, at least from a federal perspective, it comes down to really larger policy questions. So there are a couple of issues. One of which is funding. I mean, genuinely speaking, the way that federal funding is set up right now for K-12 education, without getting into too much minutia, there are clearly identified career tracks that can receive federal funding at the K-12 level. Right now, game design, there is no kind of natural home for it, and so it's very difficult for a K-12 educational institution to get funding for game design. They can get all the pieces. They can get graphic arts, they can get coding, but game design and even coding in many instances, they just don't have a natural home right now. So that's actually part of what ESA and part of what myself and my colleagues are doing right now, is trying to get the government to take a more inclusive view and see that video games as themselves are a career path. Not only do we have students who are interested in doing it at the K-12 level, we've got 521 colleges and universities that offer degree-seeking video game industry feeder programs, and we've got almost 3,100 companies creating video games across the United States. So the pipeline is there. In the pipeline sense, the ecosystem is important, but the pipeline and the trajectory from the government perspective is there, but there's just no incentive right now for the government to actually fund it because they just don't connect the kind of two dots, and that's part of what we're working on. The other issue, which we've gotten a lot of feedback on as ESA, is even just coding. For a lot of school districts, there is no natural home for coding. It doesn't make sense in a foreign language department. Not everybody has a raw computer science curriculum. So from the educator perspective, you may be able to address that better, but just anecdotally, it's...
your note about in the foreign language section made me, because it made me chuckle, because I totally understand where it comes from.
And that's actually, there's federal legislation right now that would actually make computer science and coding a foreign language, so you can take French, Spanish, or Java.
Well, yeah, one more thing to wrap it up.
One quick thing is I would take a look, speaking of what we can support federally, next generation science standards. You should check out for educators who aren't paying attention, maybe you're not science educators. Next generation science standards have a lot in them that absolutely intersects with programs that involve and educators who are involving games-based learning. So I would pay attention to them and figure out ways to support at the state level or whatever your lever is, support next generation science standards and get your schools and states excited about it.
And also supporting that culture in your school, right? Mm-hmm. Like we talk about passion, but what about the passion of teachers? You're never gonna be a great painting teacher if you hate painting. It's the same with anything, right?
All right, I think on that, we're gonna wrap it up. I love the passion and culture in schools. Let's leave with that. So thank you. Yes, thank you. Kevin, Marc, Ani.
Thank you guys.
Sara, Michael, and especially Olivia and Geneva. Thank you very much for sharing your games with us. Thank you.